Yeah, that's a completely different
Feel.
feel. I mean, our first one went there, and then I got lazy
Exactly.
and then went over. But then when I read,
Yeah, you put most of them in there. I got 2, 4, 6. So yeah, that's pretty good shooting though, right there.
yeah, what's going on, guys? It's me. I'm Big Game James underscore 36 in a special show that we're doing Tuesdays and Thursdays in an attempt to be able to put out more content that explains things that we want to be able to flesh out in a little bit more detail. We'll bring on experts or people who I believe have really, really good opinions about certain things that are going on in college sports. In particular, the one thing that we have right now is college football realignment. There are so many different ways and matters, and we have the legal. That's how we have my guy with Rohan Law. We have Danielle Kelly. They'll do those things all the time. They're able to explain the legal side of it, the civil side of it. But then there's also the debates that go on and on where everybody's just like, why would you leave? Why are you doing this? Why do you think you're this? Why do you think you're that? And outside of just having, oh, I feel like I'm that guy. I feel like we're that big of a brand. Well, do you have the data? Do you have the cachet? Do you have the things that you think you have to be able to explain the position that you have? And that's part of what we like to do is we're trying to help people have intelligent bar arguments. And shout out to everybody who's joining right now. Good morning. Appreciate you, especially when you join in the chat. Just house rules for those who have never watched Den Media Group. Well, actually, we'll take good questions from anybody. If you are a member of Den Media Group, your question probably more than likely gets put to the front. If you do a super chat, your thing gets put to the front as well. Basically, cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. We will add, but the questions have to be good and on par with what we're talking about today. We're talking about charts. We're talking about things, and as I explained with my good friend Tony, who I met doing smart shit on Mark Rogers and on social media and a lot of different things. He has been really leading the charge of breaking this stuff down for the last 2 years. And really where I met him was when I started saying, yo, we're getting out of the ACC 2 years ago. And that's when I got actually then by chance I met Tony. Tony had a lot of stuff, and I'm just like, you're not changing. He wasn't trying to change my mind. He just presented the facts, presented the details, and from the details, anybody with you don't even have to have a genius level intellect. As I said, anybody who is a C plus student, guys like me, C plus student but I graduated in 3.5 years as a C plus student. You can probably put together the pieces and be able to tell your friends and sound a lot smarter than what you are, which is the beautiful thing about not debate radio, which is what media should be these days. Media should be, I'm learning something to where I can go engage in intelligent debate and sound smart, as opposed to who's yelling the loudest and all of these other different things. I want to be able to present those things. I have all of his accolades in the bio. I mean, in the description on the YouTube. So please make sure you check that out. Please make sure you go give him a follow at TJALTIMORE. Again, I'm telling you, it's very engaging, very interesting. And again, he uses pictures and graphs for us slow folks. So what's going on, Tony? How you doing?
Good. How are you guys? Sorry, I'm a little sick, so I'm sucking on a cough drop. So I apologize to everybody in the chat.
No,
first and foremost,
I want to give you props. And I'm not picking up. When did you take that headshot for your Twitter profile?
Oh, I don't know. It's actually like 5 years old. I need to do a new one.
Nah, man, it's good. I'm sitting here like, man, I gotta put this as my YouTube. This is a handsome Joker right here, man.
No, I gotta do a new one actually.
Gotta let the people see him, man. So
I know the hair goes gray too fast.
Oh man, it happens. That's that wisdom. That's all these charts you're putting up. All these charts you're putting up, like, it's making you smarter with the gray. Can you give us a quick rundown and just an introduction to who you are? It's a little bit better than what I gave, and then why we should be listening to you as an expert on basically the numbers expert. We'll call you the numbers man.
All right, sure. So I actually, in my regular work, I do strategy consulting work for companies, for nonprofits, some higher ed, started working with more folks in sports, but mostly doing corporate work. But for background, I worked in the athletic department at USC as an undergrad. I helped run a club sports team at the University of Pennsylvania in grad school. Went to USC for undergrad, went to the Wharton School of Penn for my MBA. And during the realignment mess, what I found was a lot of the sports media folks didn't understand the business of sports and the business of higher ed and the important role, the fact that, like, at the end of the day, these are higher ed companies. These are higher ed organizations. So, it's a little bit kind of like you think about, the people get mad at me when I use this as an example, but like when we think about like sports as part of a university, it's like we're kind of arguing about the menu of the food court at a Walmart, and we're forgetting that at the end of the day, it's a Walmart.
Mm.
And so I try to help some media folks really kind of come to understand higher ed as a business. And from there, I got invited to, I helped co-host, started hosting some podcasts, helping do some stuff with the Voice of College Football channel, co-host the USC post-game live with them. And so, again, I really try to help folks understand the data and the information about what is really sort of driving the bigger picture of the role that college football plays in universities, which is a big important role, but is not the whole thing at the end of the day.
Definitely makes sense. I think a lot of people, I think you brought it up. Most people look at this as two separate entities. Like you have just the sports franchise, which is kind of what people look at college sports, because we watch it on ESPN and we see the pro side of it, and there's so much emphasis on the individual owner, and that's all that they do. But then you got literally these billion-dollar companies that are higher education that have so many other things going for them that, especially when we were talking about, when you look at the argument from one of my favorite movies, The Program, is that when's the last time that you've seen 85,000 people show up for somebody to do a math problem? And that sounds good, right? Until you realize that, wait a minute, the math grants and the research that they're getting, maybe it is the equivalent of 85,000 people showing up to a game to watch somebody do.
And some of these schools is the equivalent of 850,000 people showing up.
Right. So, and that's when I started really opening my mind about what it's really about. And I go back to, I tell people this, some of the things that, as a graduate of Florida State and a guy who's been able to meet presidents of the schools and have genuine chats with them, I fall back to two conversations. The first conversation they had with me was way back in freshman intake in 2002, where they said the goal was to make Doak Campbell Stadium the center of FSU's campus. And at the time, like, you had the stadium and then everything was like north of the stadium, just using the direction. So in order for that to happen, they had to push south. Now, unfortunately, and I was explaining this as a Tallahassee guy, to push south, there's another college campus that's south. And that's FAMU. I said, it's really got nothing to do with FAMU. It's got everything to do with what the mission is. And you're either in the way or you're not in the way. And I said, that's where, but I told people, once I understood that, I knew why some of the expansions and some of the things that they were doing, the purchases made sense. But then when we brought in President Thrasher, who was a former, and we brought him in because he was a former politician. He was a state senator. He also understood fundraising, and his job was to make us more competitive as the flagship in the state of Florida, as opposed to the University of Florida. So when you understood those two things, every decision that Florida State makes sense. And I said, well, okay, so we want to compete for funds. So I knew that. Okay, so okay, whatever. Then I meet you, and you tell me about the Big Ten AU, and you tell me about all these other universities and how the academics, they don't just partner with each other and as a football conference. They partner with each other as an academic conference. And so again, it is so much bigger than sports, because when you look at what Miami has and what Florida has, major hospitals that partner with that. Well, Florida State just partnered with Tallahassee Memorial Hospital. Well, who else has the schools that basically follow those same blueprints that have been doing this for years and sharing information? Damn near everybody in the Big Ten has this. So those are just some things that, again, meeting you, and then, talking about those things. And since this time, we've had major legal things have happened.
Huge thing. Well, the other thing is, these schools want to be great at everything they do. And that's one of the things that people don't always understand is like they want to be great at football. They want to be great at, research. They want to be great at educating students. They want to be great at medicine. They want to be great at agriculture. And so like they want to be they want to be the best they can be at everything they do. And they don't want anything to be mediocre. Like mediocrity is a problem. And so that's one of the things when people are like, oh, this doesn't matter. Like, oh, it matters because to these leaders in these schools, everything matters. They want to be good at everything they do.
Which anybody who loves sports can understand that. Like, you don't want your team to be mediocre. You want your team to be great. Everybody's competing for the national championship. And when you don't win in that, I've heard this. Oh, we didn't. Florida State had the greatest season, one of the greatest seasons they've ever had in school history. And it doesn't matter because we're not playing in the college football playoff. The season sucks. I'm like, but you can't understand that maybe our president thinks the same way about
engineering,
the engineering program and things of that nature. So
the med school.
Again, so we look at what Florida State's gotten in the last even 30 years: a law school, a med school. Well, we've had the law school for a while. We took that from FAMU, unfortunately, but we got a medical school. They're trying to revamp the e-school because we share it with FAMU currently, but they want their own. They want both schools to have their own e-schools. And our journalism departments. It's just a bunch of different things that have taken off. So the real reason for why we're having this isn't obviously this is a FSU centered channel, but this is a channel nonetheless that covers all sports in all schools. We have heavy Southeast influence, Florida, Miami, a lot of those things. But the landscape of college football is changing. Oh yeah, all day Florida State though. Got to be that. The landscape of football is changing. So the ACC is getting into these different things. Don't want to talk about that. Want to talk about basically where does the ACC stand in comparison to other conferences across the metrics that matter, whether it's sports and TV. But again, as what really inspired more of this recently is having a friend or on social media tell me that it's more than sports. Well, where does the ACC stand in the things that matter academically? I don't care about if a degree. None of us are Harvard, but the reality is this:
some of the ACC is pretty close.
You said what?
Some of the ACC and Big Ten are fairly close.
Yeah. Money is the motivator. Like, where do we stand in endowments? Where do we stand in funds raised? Those different things. Why would Florida State want to leave the ACC, or why would anybody want to leave the ACC that's maybe not sports related? So we'll go with that. Do you want to touch on that first before we got to go into hit them with the charts?
Yeah. So I would say one of the things with the ACC, when you guys are talking about the ACC and the Big Ten, there are 3 just elite academic conferences, right? for big time sports. The Ivy League, which is actually usually like the number 5 conference across all sports. The Big Ten and the ACC. So you are getting into really rarefied air here. And one of the things about Florida State that people don't realize is the transformation of Florida State from the 1980s to today. Florida State is currently the number 53 ranked school in the nation academically. Like, Florida State is now an academic powerhouse. And again, people that went to school in the 1980s, when it was more of a fun place and less of that, like, they may not understand that. But Florida State is an academic powerhouse. And the ACC helps you get there. So regardless of whether you're in the ACC or the Big Ten, you're in a good place. It's just a matter of trying to find the best place for you and trying to close the revenue gap that you have right now. Now, one of the issues, and we can talk about this more, is that, what does it cost you to close the revenue gap? It's kind of like, oh, I'm going to move to a nicer house, but it's going to cost me too much more to move. Like, there's some issues there that Florida State needs to sort of sort through, which your legal folks are sorting through. But we can take a look at sort of why that revenue gap is there and how you guys can kind of neutralize it and where you stand compared to some of these other schools. And I don't know, should we start with TV?
Sure. Let's start with that.
Okay, so one of the things with TV that I found is really interesting is the difference that so when you guys hear about like all the TV numbers, I've done a ton of analysis on the TV data for college football, particularly focused on 2012 to current and 2016 to current. And the first big thing is that channel matters. So what channel you're on determines how many people watch your games. Now, one of the amazing things about the Big Ten is the Big Ten copied the NFL's model, and the new Big Ten contract has games on CBS, Fox, and NBC. And then their extraneous cable games are on BTN and FS1. But if you see here, being on the big networks gets tons of people to watch you. So the channel matters more than anything. Now, when we think about it, so again, being on those big OTA networks, the over-the-air networks, the CBS, Fox, ABC, NBC, that matters more than anything. So who's on those channels? Well, looking just at 2016 to 23, you guys had 34 games on network TV. How does that compare to everybody else? Well, and by the way, for these purposes, we consider Notre Dame to be part of the ACC because even though you have kind of your complicated relationship with them, strategically, they are a very important part of the ACC. So you will see Notre Dame with the ACC here. Again, you have your complicated relationship with them, but strategically, they're a super important part of the ACC. So of the full ACC members, you're number 2 behind Clemson over this period. Again, you guys were kind of bad during a lot of this period too. So like, that's really good. People want to watch Florida State games, right? So if your bad period is, second or third in the conference, that's hard to beat. Only one Big 12 team had more games than you, and that was Oklahoma State. In the Big 10, you'd be, fairly middle of the pack, but again, that's pretty good. Now, this is something that I thought was really interesting. Of all the TV viewership, half of it comes from just 18 schools, and you're one of them. Again, even in your bad period, you guys are one of them. And then here's the crazy part: of the more than half of the bottom 10, the bottom 71 schools, that's 53% of the FBS schools. Only 10% of the viewership is there. So the value is all in the top. And who are the 18 schools? Well, it's right on here. It's right here. It's you guys in USC and Oregon and Florida, Texas, Penn State, Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, Clemson, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Washington. So, I mean, it's those big brand teams that really drive the viewership, and you're one of them. So, you can see why Florida State recognizes its own value. And I think that's a really important thing.
So when I did the numbers on that, and again, obviously it's not just hard because obviously some schools will be a little bit bigger than others, especially during this time period. There's
and you're also bigger if you're in the playoffs, right?
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, playoffs, conference championships, things that Florida State really wasn't in outside of this past season. So you gave up a lot of games to Clemson. But when you think about it, so yeah, it was it 50% divided by 18 is 2.7%. If we add Notre Dame in there, what is that? 5.4. So you got just over 8%, almost 8.5% of TV viewership comes from 3 teams that are in one conference. So I can see why the ACC would have to fight, because if you lose Clemson and Florida State, that's a lot.
That's a huge piece.
But at the same time, 2.7% of a big pie is a lot. And which is also valuable. So when people say, why would the SEC wouldn't want you, the Big Ten wouldn't want you, who wouldn't want 2.7% of the total viewership? Because that's what drives numbers when it comes to basically marketing deals.
Yeah, I mean, there is a ton of value in Florida State games. Now, here's one of the challenges. So this is a look at operating margin. So this is taking out, like, how much do you make, and now taking out the academic subsidies. So I don't really count the academic subsidies as revenues. Like, how self-sustaining.
What's the academic subsidy?
Amounts that the university gives the athletic department to pay for itself.
Okay.
Now, in fairness, that's not always a bad thing, right? Because I'll give you an example. Like like let's look at like Cal and Arizona State just had an epic like world famous swim meet, right? It's like a preview of the Olympics at this swim meet they had in the rain. Like that costs money to win Olympic, like Florida's like, winning Olympic medals and stuff. That costs a lot of money. But the question is like, how self-sustaining is your athletic department? Well, yours is actually not self-sustaining. And in the ACC, only 2 of them made an operating profit. This now we're just getting the new fiscal year 23 numbers are just starting to come out. So this is fiscal year 22.
Our fiscal 23 numbers are going to look worse because they're going
to look worse because you spent more.
We really want to look poor right now. We have to.
You do. You want to look poor. Now, I mean, again, and you can afford to, but also remember a lot of this is choices. So you guys just won the national championship in women's soccer, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. Like that costs money. So there's a great example. If you look at Kansas State has financially one of the best run athletic departments in the country. It's because they don't win anything. They don't spend anything. They don't win. They've never won a national championship ever in any sport, but they break even. So here's the thing, it's kind of like, somebody who's like, well, I overspend a lot, but I can afford it. You kind of debate on that versus somebody who's like really frugal and fiscally responsible. Kansas State versus, Cal, for example. So, you guys are spending a lot, but there's a reason because you're choosing to say, we want to be world class. We want to win. Kansas State is saying, we just don't want to spend. So, again, neither of those is right and neither of those is wrong, but those are 2 different philosophies. So what you guys are saying is we want to spend and we want to win, so we need to make more money. Now, one thing I will give a caveat in is what I call the secret margin. By the way, no G5 program breaks even. They all lose big. Now, there's what I call the secret profitability, which is, remember, there's a weird situation where the school's giving the athletic department money, but then the athletic department is also paying the school money for scholarships. Right. So, for example, when you sat in Econ 101, your seat, whether you were sitting in it or not, didn't cost the school any more money.
Right.
But you were getting billed. The school was billing the athletic department for you to sit there a fortune. And not only that, when you factor in the value that walk-ons pay, who you recruit to come to the school, like those walk-on football players, they come to Florida State to play football. They don't just come to Florida State for engineering. They come to Florida State to play football. And so they pay for that privilege. So when you factor in those 2 numbers, it's what I call the secret operating margin. You guys do break even. Now, school accountants get really mad at this, but like finance people understand it. You're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But you sort of see, look how low you are compared to the other schools.
It's kind of like me charging my son's rent.
Exactly.
I was going to pay for their room anyway, but the fact that they're there is like, I could be making money off of that, but it doesn't really cost me any extra money.
Exactly. Now, what UCLA does is they not only do that, but they tell their kids, this is the shady part about UCLA. They tell their kids, oh, you don't have the money. I'll loan it to you and I'll charge you interest. And then I'll just keep racking up that interest until you join the Big Ten and can afford to pay it back.
Oh, wow.
That's literally what's going on at UCLA. It's the shadiest thing I've ever seen. But we're not here to talk about the Bruins, although we could do that all day. It's as a Trojan, it's one of my favorite pastimes. Now when you look at the G5, you see again very few of them start to break even, but very, very, very few.
Now, can you go back a little bit to where the school, like not to where the schools are paying money, like right here.
Yeah,
not the secret, like the actual
the regular one,
regular one. Yeah. So it's funny when you look at again what the ACC brings in from their revenue from the TV things, and everybody's poor in the ACC compared to this. And the Cal SMU. I guess you don't have SMU in Miami because
the private schools we don't have all the data on. Right.
So, but I'm pretty sure it's relatively similar.
Oh yeah, they're dumping money in.
Everybody's poor, but when you look at the schools with competent TV deals, at least more than half seem to be operating in a better fiscal situation.
Well, the one thing I would warn you guys to think about, we can talk more about this in a little bit when we think about like the bigger financing. Be careful, because one of the things that the ACC did is that they signed a long forever TV deal when they thought, and Pac-12 did the same thing when they thought it was a really good deal. And then 12 years later, it's not a good deal. So one of the things that is a risk is having too long a commitment, where you think it's a good idea and then the world changes and now it's not.
Right.
It's kind of like those people that had those like bad mortgages in 2008.
Yeah, the
you gotta
ones,
be careful on
that. The interest, the variable interest loans.
Exactly, and it all came back to
a good idea.
Blow up. Yeah, it seemed like that was not that's kind of how I look at like the Pac-12's deal and the ACC's deal, because when the Pac-12 and the ACC both made their deals, they were the best TV deals ever made in history at those 2 points. And then 12 years later, they were bad. So it's like, it's like getting into a bad mortgage. And can you sort it out?
In some of this stuff, when it comes to athletics or in general, anything when it comes to marketing, you got to have some forethought. Like LeBron gets a lot of critique for him always signing his 2-year deals, but he also understands what the market is. He knows he has 1 year where he has to play, and then the second year is always an option year, which creates more revenue for the team, but also gives him the flexibility to leave whenever the hell it is he wants to leave. The cornerback, Darrelle Revis, did something very similar in his last few years, which always kept giving him the opportunity to make more money. But I'm just looking at it more from a perspective of, we see what happens when you have competent leadership, that as opposed to not. You have most of your conference, even though the numbers are fixed a little bit. But if you're looking at it from how it should be looking at it, most of your conference is underwater, whereas the SEC, there's 3 schools that are, but even then, like one of them, Tennessee wants to win, and they've had actually Tennessee, South Carolina, and Mississippi State, Ole Miss have massive buyouts that they've had to have numerous times.
And the other thing is, those are not big numbers of losses. Like $9 million to the University of Mississippi is not a lot of money. It's like a rounding error to them. So like, it's okay for some of these schools to lose some of that money. Remember, they're not losing the money on football. They're losing the money on tennis and soccer and swimming and volleyball. And they're saying, you know what? We're okay with that. Because, you think about like, let's pick on Central Florida, right? Like they subsidize their athletic department to no end, but they also have that like giant Springfest thing or whatever it's called. It's like this huge thing that has to cost a fortune. So remember, they do things that they spend money on things for the school that cost a bunch, and they're okay with that. But the question is, can you afford how much you're having to subsidize? And that's where I think this gets really interesting. So this is how much the subsidy is as a percent of the core budget. So like, yeah, you're spending a lot of money on athletics. You're losing money. That's fine. You're okay with that. And you're okay with losing money, but can you afford how much money you're losing? So I'll give you an example. At Coastal Carolina, every student at Coastal Carolina, every single student is paying $4,000 towards the subsidy of their athletic department.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. At Florida State, it's like $700. At Coastal Carolina, actually, no, hold on. We'll look at it at Florida State in just a sec. But so this is a look at like how much is the subsidy, and you see like the G5. I don't know how this is sustainable. But then you take a look down here at the bottom at the SEC, Big Ten, ACC. All of a sudden, you're like, okay, we can afford it. Like University of California loses a ton of money and absolutely afford it. So this is each school. Now this is total budget. The other one was core budget. So sorry guys, it's a little. Two slides are measuring some slightly different things. But this is how much of this is your total budget. It's not just your subsidy. How much of your budget do you spend on sports? And if you look at you guys here at 9.7%. So, kind of high. Now, part of the reason for that is you don't have a giant healthcare empire. right? Like UCLA has in Washington, have like Michigan, they have like healthcare systems that they own. And all that adds economic heft to your school. People are like, you shouldn't count that. I'm like, of course you count it. That's part of the budget.
Money. Yeah.
So, so for some of them, again, they have more money they can just sort of throw around. And I had somewhere, so I'm trying to find something. Oh yeah, this is where I want to find that subsidy per student. Sorry guys, my computer's being a little slow here. So this is that. How much are you giving up? What is it doing? Sorry, I think my computer doesn't like while we're streaming, trying to change through this huge slide deck. This is where I was trying to get to. Subsidy per student. Crud. There we are. Sorry, guys. It's IT today. It's fun. So how much is each Florida State student having to pay to subsidize your athletic department? Right now, it's $740. So when you guys think about it, like if you can make more money somewhere else, then that's $740 per student that can go into financial aid. It can go into scholarships. It can go into classroom. It can go into research. It can go into like student life. It can go into whatever. Because right now, Florida State is having to pay $740 per student to subsidize the athletic department.
That's like almost $37 million that Florida State makes off of students. That's crazy. So we have about 50 total between, I think, undergrad and grad.
Actually, this is just undergrad.
Oh, just undergrad. All right, so
yeah,
I think we're at 30 undergrad. Well, that's what it's been on average. 22 million. Still a 22 million off the top ain't bad.
Yeah, and I don't remember the exact total, but yeah, this was per undergrad per student. But you take a look at these other schools, right? Like the SEC, most of them are like zero. Tennessee, remember how we said they're losing money? Well, they're losing $9 a student. Oh well, they're subsidizing $9 a student. They can, they can afford it. Michigan, it's $5 a student.
Jeez.
So, again, this is the kind of thing where when we think about why is it important, the schools can afford it, but at the end of the day, if you can take that money and use it for scholarships, what if you said to every kid at Florida State, we'll give you an extra $700 in scholarship? Like, yes, please.
Or you could give them, like, you get a laptop when you enroll per year or some kind of, something. That's it's
real money.
Real money, yeah.
It's real money. And so that's where closing that gap makes a difference. And, one of the areas that this matters is endowments. So endowments are the school's sort of, it's kind of like a 401k for the school. It's this sort of like big savings account essentially that the school has. That then the interest of it helps the school itself. And so schools with the big endowments, are making tons of money off that to help pay for the school. And schools without it have to rely on tuition and rely on, sort of like it's like living to paycheck versus having a trust fund.
Serious question. Again, you got to remember, we're C+ students here. What's an endowment? Now, I know my people know when only time the people who listen to my channel, when they hear well endowed, they think of alphamailjacks.com. Go to alphamailjacks.com. Make sure if you're having issues there, we can
help take care of it.
Help take care of it. Get your body built up to where you're feeling young again. But could you tell us what endowment means in this sense, and then where we go from there?
Yeah. So every school has an endowment, which is like a trust fund.
Okay.
It's like I said, it's sort of like a 401k for your school. It's like a trust fund. And you don't ever spend the money in the account, but as that money makes money, you get that money to spend in your school. Again, just like a trust fund. So, it's usually you get like about 5% per year that you get to spend on the school. Now, some of these schools have a ton of money. Harvard has $50 billion. If Harvard actually just spent the recommended amount, they wouldn't have to charge tuition. There's no reason for Harvard to even charge tuition. They don't need to. They have so much money. Some of the public schools even are ridiculous. Stanford has $36 billion. Texas, because the University of the state of Texas, like a long time ago, like 100 years ago or something, I don't know the details exactly. They took a huge oil field and they gave 2/3 of it to UT and 1/3 to A&M. So as a result, Texas has $42 billion.
That makes
A&M
sense.
has
Now,
18.
oil money.
It's literally like an oil field's money. Quite honestly, not exaggerating. So some of these schools just have just enormous resources. Now, you guys, because you're a younger school, right? You were all girls until the 40s or something. You don't have
Right
that sort
after
of
the
like
Great War.
those sort of generational things. So I think the last number you had, you have about 900 million, which is, compared to a lot of schools is great. Like compared to the G5, that's really good. But compared to some of these other schools here, you're half or a third or a fourth or a fifth or a tenth of what they have. So they just have this. It's like, again, it's like being a trust fund kid. These schools have these huge amounts of money that are throwing stuff off for them. So again, Stanford, if Stanford loses money on sports, who cares? Stanford has all the money in the world. The Stanford Athletic Endowment, just the athletic piece of that, they have their own athletic piece of that. And it's huge.
I know Stanford, I think there's something in the state of California, if you make under $100,000 and you're accepted, you go for free.
Yeah,
Like,
they don't need the money. So
ironically, nothing to do with sports. Guys, not every school, but this is a case that college doesn't have to be as expensive as they make it, guys. Like,
I agree completely.
Somebody I don't give a damn what anybody says. Like, I mean,
you have $50 billion, you don't need to charge tuition.
Yeah, but you can go for free. You'll be okay if just make them have to be smart or something. But again, all right, back to sports.
You're completely right. You are 100% right. 100% right on that, which is a huge thing that I try to point out to people. But now if we take a look at it per student, this is interesting too. Yeah, Luke, I have no idea on that. That is a really good question. Actually, that's a question a lot of Texas people would like to know too. But if we take a look at this, is how much they have per student. It's like how much is in the trust fund per student. This is all students, not just undergrads.
Yeah.
This is look at the ACC here. Stanford has $2.1 million in their trust fund, essentially here, their endowment per student. You guys have 23,000. So you are the smallest in the ACC. You would be the smallest in the Big Ten, the third smallest in the SEC, and you'd be third smallest in the Big 12. Jeez. So, this is the kind of thing where you guys one of the reasons I think that it's very important for Florida State right now to close its revenue gap is because you don't have a huge trust fund throwing your school money. So why is it more important for Florida State to worry about this than Virginia? Because you don't have a huge trust fund throwing off money to the school. So losing money is important to Florida State, I think. Again, I haven't talked to your president personally, but I think you guys you don't have that it's just like an extra benefit. So let's look at should we look at how you guys fit in against other conferences?
Yeah, because right now I'm feeling real small right now. I don't know how well we fit anywhere right now. Well, I feel like throwing a hot dog down a hallway. You just showed me what my endowment was. Yeah.
The endowment is a small thing. Now, again, the great thing about Florida State is you're a huge public school. You're a piece of the government. You're a really important school. So the money itself is not a problem. You just don't have that huge trust fund. Now, one of the things we talked about is the academic transformation. Now, you guys are all Seminoles who are watching this. You guys know that Florida State today is different than Florida State in the 80s. You are right now, again, the number 53 ranked school in the nation academically. So where does that compare against conferences? Well, in the ACC, you're right in the middle. Now, when you joined in 1990 or whatever, you were not right in the middle. Today, you are right in the middle. So that's a good place to be. In the Big Ten, you'd be pretty good. Again, probably, middle third. SEC, you'd be in that top third. Big 12, you'd be the number one school academically in the Big 12.
I need you to send me this slide because this slide has so much shit talking potential for me.
I'll send it to you.
Just so it's so great. Like
Yeah.
yeah, like we
Well,
beat the
this is where
smartest school in the Big 12 in SEC. You
pretty good.
jorts wearing cousins of like relative relations having people like we'd only increase your value academically.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is this is where when people think of when like particularly, and this is going to sound dumb, but like when old people talk about Florida State, they talk about 1970s and 1980s Florida State. That was 40 years ago. Florida State today is a great school. I mean, Florida State back then was a great school too. Don't just but like today, it's an outstanding school, and so like it just like this is where I look at it and say. So when people think about now, again, you're not in AAU yet. You're probably I don't know about 5th or so in line to join, maybe. So hopefully soon. But in general, when people talk about does Florida State pass the hurdle of academics? Yes. Just look at it. So let's think about research. So your research, again, you guys are very much an education school. You're building your research enterprise. It's on the lower end, but it's booming. So they just came out with the FY22 numbers, which I think you were at like 360 million or something. I understand you've actually boosted that. You had like a 25% growth in the last year. Now that's not that the school said that. It's not certified by National Science Foundation yet. I assume your school wasn't making it up. So, if I take your school's word for it, you're huge in that. Now, these particular research numbers, these include med schools and on-campus labs. So, actually, in this chart, you would have to push down Nebraska. You'd be above Nebraska today in this chart. So, you'd be 3rd in the Big Ten. And you'd be right. The ACC, you'd be right about where same place you are. Big 12, you'd be same place you are. SEC, you'd be higher, right? So you'd be above Tennessee, and I think above Oklahoma. So you'd move up a little bit based on your new numbers that I've just heard.
But we'd still be behind the guys that we're trying to compete with, as I talked about earlier.
Well, the one guys that you're trying to compete with, I would say, the guys in orange and blue that you guys do not like, we can hate their football team, but they are a really good school.
Yes.
So like, I give like Florida like some look at Florida on the hold on, we can hate the Gators for being Gators. Sorry, the blue I'm wearing today was not intentional. It's just cold here in Florida. But like, let's give like a shout out to the Gators for having like a pretty good school, because you guys are also a really good school. And again, Florida's a major important state. It needs to have lots of great schools, and it does. Right? So we got you guys, we got Miami, we've got Florida, we got new school, we got USF is like booming. So like Central's doing really great things. So like kudos to the state of Florida, because like despite how they try to like, I don't know, ban and burn books, like they're building some really great colleges. So,
it's not a bad state. It's just like hurricanes. Like if you watch the Weather Channel, you would think the whole state's underwater. Like my family's from the Northeast.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great analogy.
They're calling me like, "Oh my God, are you okay? Are you even alive?" I'm like, "Man, it's a category."
You're like, it's drizzling.
3.
It's drizzling.
I was like, "Don't call me unless it's category 4 or higher. Category 3 is nothing more than a bad rainstorm." I was like, "We're fine. We're okay." And then just like the other stuff, like my family called, I heard that it's like it's some wild shit that's happened. Like suing Disney wasn't the brightest thing that our governor did, but
and California does the same thing sometimes. So I understand.
Politics, man. It's a lot of dumb shit on both sides. But what I will say is this: what in the communism is going on in the Big Ten? And I say this with tongue in cheek. Where it looks like we're in the ACC, I want to say this, excuse me, I curse in this channel. I try not to do it on Marks, but fuck Cal, even though they just got here. Fuck Duke. Fuck Stanford. Fuck you. This is why people want to eat the rich. Look at them. Look at them compared to the rest of us.
Oh, I know. Remember, too, Cal. So Cal, by the way, we had to add $1 billion. Cal has, remember, Cal builds nukes.
That's crazy.
Right? Like literally, I mean, Cal, they invented nuclear weapons. All those people in Oppenheimer, they were Berkeley professors.
No way.
Yeah. Oppenheimer was Professor Oppenheimer. The guy the Josh Hartnett character in that movie, his partner, his research partner, who he co-won the Nobel Prize with, was the founder of the Pac-12.
That's wild.
Literally, the reason the Cal numbers are stupid.
People then.
Yeah, Cal's building nukes.
All right, but that's great. Well, I say that to say is again, the case for why would anybody want to be here, non-sports related. We will get back to that maybe with some more slides, but you can make a case against the sport. You don't even have to have the sports. They are sharing in the Big Ten. Look at that.
And here's the thing too. You look at this chart, and let's talk about why it's really good that you guys just added Cal and Stanford. Like, you guys just got like two amazing, like you guys just bought like two amazing houses in Pebble Beach for like dirt cheap because they need new roofs.
Fair.
You know,
if we knew we had somebody that was competent that could do something with them, and SMU, I'm assuming. Well, no, my bad. I'm not assuming. SMU doesn't have a lot.
Well, but SMU and BC, like SMU and BC are both really great schools. They're just undergrad focused.
But like I'm looking here, and the money is all at the top. Spread that shit out. Like that's the problem. If we knew, this is why I say it's more than sports, because if we come over to the Big Ten, where you look at it is 1.8 billion for those who are going to be listening to this in the podcast form. So Michigan leads at 1.8 billion. Right under that, Washington, who just came in, is at 1.6, UCLA at 1.5, Wisconsin. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 institutions before the ones that just came over that were operating over $1 billion in research. Whereas the ACC has, if you take out the two that just got here, Duke, UNC, Pitt, and Georgia Tech, two are private schools that operate with the most research funds. Like they're not again non-sports related. It doesn't benefit any of the lower. What is that? What would that be? Is that 70% of the conference doesn't benefit by staying.
Well, and remember the other thing that the Big Ten does, for example, is the Big Ten, they work with each other to hire each other's students to be their own professors.
There we go.
So how do you grow this stuff? Well, you hire the research assistant who was the PhD student who studied under the guy at so-and-such a school. And so you incestuously grow this stuff together through partnerships they actually do research partnerships. They work together on this stuff. And I mean, it makes like some other schools mad when you talk about it, but the Big Ten does that. Like, they believe sort of in partnering with each other. And
it's a cultural thing. I think it kind of goes down to all of the stuff. I had a young man go to Penn State about not even a decade ago, about 6-7 years ago, from out of Tampa. And I talked to his father, and I was like, "Why didn't you go to Florida State?" At the time, Florida State was getting whoever they wanted to. He was a 4-star wide receiver. And he said, "Man, when I went to Penn State, when we walked in athletics, I saw Penn State grads that were still at Penn State talking about how Penn State people take care of Penn State people." It was almost like listening to somebody say Harvard does business with Harvard. Or here in Jacksonville, there's a private school, Bowles. Bowles people do business with Bowles people before they do anything else.
Yep.
And it sounds like it's kind of the next step from that is the Big Ten does business with Big Ten people first, and then I'm kind of moving from there. And when I'm looking at the research grants, most of the Big Ten, we can say Midwest, correct? Outside of your Maryland, which is now East Coast, and now your UCLA and USC, which is obviously the West Coast. If they come to the state of Florida where the weather is always great, well, outside of the hurricanes, but better weather than there, could it probably be more partnerships with, like, especially in agriculture and a lot of the other different things because of the conference affiliation, which will in turn lead to more research dollars?
Oh, yeah. And I mean, the Big Ten is like the king of agriculture, too. That's the other thing people forget. Now, again, you also added Cal, which, I mean, UC Davis, which is part of Cal, UC Davis used to be called Cal's. The name was University Farm, and then they decided that was not very nice, so they called it UC Davis.
Wow.
So like that's like the number one agriculture school in the country, depending on measurements. So like, as far as ag stuff goes, I mean, all this stuff is good. The other thing, by the way, that's not on here is, I don't know if you know this, but Johns Hopkins they've joined the Big Ten for all of their D1 sports. They only have 2 D1 sports, but they joined the Big Ten for them. And they're very, very proud members of the Big Ten. Do you know what Johns Hopkins research number is?
It's got to be pretty high.
$3.5 billion. Because they're launching satellites. So, you've got, Florida State lacrosse will be playing Johns Hopkins.
Well, we got it. We're not even going to talk about, guys, how this opens us up for Title IX to a whole plethora of other sports. We can have men's and women's lacrosse, which they play a high level of lacrosse there. Right now, our club teams are pretty good, but we can't have it. Women's lacrosse, I think, is supposed to be on the docket.
I think you're upgrading it, right?
Yeah. What's the oh man, I forgot the name of it. The other, it's the female equivalent to football. In terms of numbers, I know Wake Forest has it.
Field hockey.
Field hockey. There we go. We bring field hockey. Now we can go have more male sports. So guys, we can't have more male sports. We can't have men's soccer because we don't have enough. Our conference doesn't have enough things for us to be able to do it. So,
well, and the big thing we need to do with this, and there are some interesting proposals on this with how to do it for football. We need to just get football out of the calculation of Title IX.
That would help.
Because the thing of it is, in all honesty, let's be honest, guys. You guys hate me for this. Title IX is a great law. It's a really important law. The problem is that it's really important in everything it does across the university. But in athletics, football is just like this giant weight that screws it up. And if we can just take that giant weight off the scale that doesn't belong there, because football is the revenue piece that pays for everything, then all of a sudden that law is doing exactly what it's supposed to do and make sure that things are equal in college sports. There's just no equivalent to football, and also football's paying for everything.
That part.
So that, again, that's a whole like complicated issue there, but like, don't blame Title IX for being bad. Just blame the fact that we haven't figured out how to get football off that scale.
I mean, here's the reality. It's kind of like delving for a little bit. We'll get back to it. It's like DEI right now. That's the new DEI is the new scary word right now. So it's the new CRT, which most people don't know what CRT is.
Which is also not even a thing. But go on.
That's my point. Like CRT, unless you're a lawyer, like that's the only time like you're studying for pre-law. But whatever. DEI shouldn't be a conversation because we should be at a point to where we shouldn't have to have that conversation. Yeah. I shouldn't feel this way. We shouldn't still be having first. If we were more inclusive, we wouldn't need to have these conversations because you would feel that way. We'll be like, oh, it feels so normal for this person to do that. So I agree with the lady. We shouldn't have. It was so bad that we had to make laws to correct it. But unfortunately, what happens sometimes is the laws that corrected it don't necessarily adapt to what the times are. And a simple
especially
thing
when there's weird exceptions.
Yeah, like if you just take football out of it, it would all of a sudden make way more sense. But
and remember too, guys, it's not a sports law; it's across everything in the university.
Right.
So it's a university law. It's not about sports; it's about higher education as a whole. And that's the thing, is like we only think about it in sports, but it's actually about higher education as a whole.
And the only gripe I truly have with it is that it only comes up when we talk about like scholarships and stuff. We never talk about Title IX and why the softball coach who has a national championship at Florida State and the women's soccer coach who now has a national championship don't make what the taxes that our head football coach makes. Which, not judging anybody's pockets, but it's funny that you never go that route with the Title IX. We only go with the part that kind of only gives you some more things. But yeah, like Luke put, it's why Jameis Winston got suspended. He got suspended because, well, a university policy that he No, he got suspended because we needed to do something. It was 2 other players that got suspended for Title IX. The university got sued for Title IX for James, but it wasn't why he was suspended. But all right, back to the nerd stuff, which is got me excited. I don't know if anybody else likes this, but fuck them. This is why I do the show, so I can do stuff that I like. Good to be
here. I like that. I like that. By the way, for you guys who don't know, by the way, I grew up in Michigan. My first ever game at the Big House, because one of my dad's friends was a coach in Michigan and all kinds of stuff, but was watching. I was a little kid, and my dad took me to see Bobby Bowden, and they were going. It was #1 Florida State against #4 Michigan, and it was one of the best teams that Michigan ever had in the school. And Florida State ran through them like a freight train through a haystack. So ever since then, I've always had like a little love for Florida State because that was a pretty incredible game.
Yeah, those 90s teams were amazing.
It was amazing. So this is an interesting thing. So this is like this now. This is actually a year old. Sorry, guys, I didn't have time to redo it. So the new data just came out, but it's not that different really. So this is total budget of the school. Like UCLA just came out this year. Now they're 11 billion, but most of them are pretty similar. And where you fit really hasn't changed. So this is a year old. Sorry about that, but it compares you to each school in terms of total budget. Like how big is your school budget? Because again, this means like how sensitive are you to revenue differences? You know, if you have a ton of money, you're not as sensitive to revenue differences. Again, Cal and Texas, by the way, on here are a little bit wacky, guys, because this doesn't count their med schools. Cal, Texas, Tennessee, Colorado. There's a few on here that are kind of wacky that you should add on. So like Cal, just like triple that number, but that's a whole sides piece. But anyway, so you sort of see here, you know, you're kind of in the middle of everything. Again, you guys would be the best school in the Big 12 if you were in the Big 12. Or you're certainly one of them. In Big 10, you're in good place, but the ACC, you're in a good place. Like the only issue that I see with the ACC really is that you guys you have that gap. Let me see if we've got something here. Where was okay? These are the brand new total school budgets. This is what I was trying to get to. So this is the brand new this year school budget. You're up to 1.5 billion. And you can see how that compares to everybody else. But you can also see if you take a look at the G5 below you guys, like, I mean, those are some great schools down there too. And, you know, you're just dwarfing a lot of them. So, you know, again, when you guys are looking up and you're saying, oh my God, we're in a bad place, like, you're only looking at the elite of the elite because everybody else is already behind you, which is okay. Like, you know, because you want to always be better, but like, just to give you some perspective on that. And
so
you'll get
this is everybody, like your teachers, building funds, all that,
hospital systems, all of that. Yeah, this is total. Now, again, some of these schools, Cal, Texas, Nebraska, Colorado, the med schools are not included in this number. Which is kind of a weird thing. They just, you know, they count the med school as like a separate school, which is kind of dumb, but they do. Sometimes when you guys will see my charts, I say with med schools. So I go through and it's a huge pain in the butt and I manually add the med schools. Now, some of them have more complexity because, for example, Alabama has a football team at their med school called UAB. So it's like, do we count UAB as Alabama because it is their med school or not? I don't know. There's not a good answer.
Oh, that's crazy, man. That's wild.
But here's another example, right? Like the Penn State med school is 3 hours from Penn State, but they count it. You know, the Alabama med school is in Birmingham and it's at UAB. Do we count it or not? I don't know. It's always a debate. But that's why, again, some of these numbers are complex. The Tennessee med school is in Memphis. Do we count it or not? Like, it's orange and it's where their kids who do really well in school go. So, you know, I tend to count it. It depends. But again, this doesn't count it right here. But yeah, you guys are in good shape. Like, yeah, Luke says UAB is a great medical facility. It really is. It's a great University of Alabama. One of my good friends from Alabama said to me the funniest thing once. When I did some stuff and I added the med schools back into the SEC that doesn't count them, and he told me, "Shh, don't let our fans know how smart our kids really are."
No, like I was,
and I laughed.
I made some of the joke. One, Dr. Andrews. Dr. Andrews is like the GOAT when it comes to trying to figure out how to make people's body parts operate again.
Cool.
With the AC, like he was the guy, the go-to guy for ACL reconstruction when I was coming up out of college.
Oh, nice.
Like, it was before he started working on it, that ACL injury was like considered like almost a death sentence to your athletic career. He got guys. I remember Greg Jones went to him, and he was back in 6 months. 8 months more. Antonio Cromartie was legitimately tore his ACL July 31st and could have played in the end of October.
Wow.
Like, he legitimately, like, but then again, some of those guys, like, two of my friends, but I don't know if they're human. I believe they're mutant.
They could be
might be a mutant. Like, yeah, definitely, like, there ain't very many. Antonio Cromartie goes around the NFL Combine. They call him the prototype. That's what everybody remembers him. So, but yeah. So a lot of those things, just very, very, very interesting, especially with the. Oh, so I was doing research about Alabama, some of the schools, and when you go look at what like the gross domestic product or like what the major export of some of the, which is ironic because I'm saying Florida State's pretty good, but when I looked at like what does Arkansas do? What do they do there? What does Alabama do? Like, what are they known for? And you go and you look at it, and you're like, I would have never thought that. Like, Alabama, I believe, like has a lot of stuff, like a lot of NASA things, a lot of aerospace engineering comes from out of that area. And I was just like, you would have never got me to believe that. Like if I didn't see that for myself, and you just came up and said, well, Alabama's known for this, I'd be like, get the fuck out of here. Well, you told me cotton or something else, I would have believed it, but not no damn not
well, that's the other thing but that's the funny thing about Alabama. So there's 3 big schools at the University of Alabama. The main school in Tuscaloosa, UAB which is University of Alabama Birmingham, and UAH, University of Alabama Huntsville. So Huntsville is where all the NASA rocket science stuff is, and Birmingham is where the med school is, and Tuscaloosa is just where sort of like the boring part of the school is. So when you look at like research in Alabama, let me just go back to that. What do we have here? So you look at Alabama here, look at research in Alabama. If you don't count the med school in Birmingham, and you don't count the rocket stuff in Huntsville, Alabama's number is like 150 million. But if you count like the stuff they're doing at their 2 side campuses, it's 1 billion. And so it's like, is it the number 150 million or is it 1 billion? I don't know which it is. It's probably somewhere, what do we count them as? How do we think about them as a school? And I think one of the things with the University of Alabama is I think they get shorted because people don't count. Like Florida, it's the University of Florida. Like they don't have pieces of it that they separate out. So that's
doing it now. They're building the campus in Jacksonville. And then FSU has we have 2 campuses. We have Panama, actually. Yeah, we have Panama City, Panama.
But you count it all as one.
But yeah, we count it all as one.
Financially, you count it all as one. Same with Penn. Penn State has a whole weird system. They got all kinds of stuff that makes it just more complex. So again, some of these schools make it more. Cal is really complex because of how they were split up in the 50s. So like in the 1950s, when the University of California med school was such a big deal, but UCLA's was not nearly a big deal, they separated Berkeley's med school, but didn't separate UCLA's. So like, okay, now do you count it as one or not? So in these numbers, like this one, you see where I say includes med schools, I add them back in. And like, again, some of like the purest data people get mad at me for that, but I think it makes sense too. Like, it's there. It's across the street. We can see the building. We should probably count it.
No, man. Again, good stuff. It's like I need to get like this. This is where I need my producer Miles to be here with the little. The more you know. So,
but I mean, the big thing for you guys too. Also, I don't think we looked at this one real quick. This is interesting. So this is like what has happened with TV in the last few years. And if you take a look, like TV was kind of a little bit up and down, and then since COVID, it's just like college football TV has just been booming. And a lot of it has to do with the Big Ten. This Big Ten contract, like this year, so TV viewing was up 10% this year. And a lot of it's because the Big Ten created more games on CBS and more games on NBC. So ABC was up a lot too. A lot of that had to do with like the playoffs this year were like so hugely watched. So actually, no, that wasn't ABC. That was ESPN. But some of the ABC games were hugely watched as well. Sorry, guys. My bad. I misspoke. But the huge big boosts there, if you look at it, are CBS and NBC and Fox, which are that new Big Ten contract. So that's, a huge gain in the watching of that stuff is coming out. And so that's where, you got Florida State to that. That's a more boom. And the other thing that is interesting about the Big Ten contract is that Fox, which isn't really talked about, there's a fourth window that's in that Big Ten contract that this year was not used at all, which is that Fox has the noon game, CBS has the 3:30 game, NBC has the 7:30 game, and then Fox has the rights to a game at 10 p.m. Eastern, or 10:30. I think it's 10 p.m. Eastern, which is all of a sudden going to get real interesting now that you've got 4 teams on the West Coast.
Which I think, like, again, with the big noon and all these other different things, I was just thinking about this again, going back to my dream situation because of all of this non-sports related shit. But also the fact that if we play Northwestern, I get to fly to Chicago. If we play Northwestern, I'm flying into Chicago. I'm not flying. Like, what really turned me off was because I work for the Gator Bowl. And we have to go scout games. I wanted to go say, you know what? I want to go get some of this SEC life. I'm terrified of Mississippi. I've never been there before. But let me go get over my fear. I want to go watch Ole Miss play somebody in Ole Miss. And so I flew. I was looking at flights, and I realized you can't fly into there. There is no flights that go there. And I had to ask somebody, well, how the hell do I go to Ole Miss? They said, well, you got to fly to Memphis. And then you have to drive 2 hours. And then there's no hotels there. Which is one of the problems with Tallahassee. Everybody bitches about the hotels. Unless you're a member of the media group, we can get you great hotel rates, but you have to be a member. The hotels are about $700 on the low end with the 2-night minimum. You can get $1,000. You can get up to $1,200, which is resort prices. Makes absolutely no sense to pay that for Tallahassee, Florida. But you mean to tell me I have to fly to Memphis? I have to rent a car. Then I have to drive. Like, nah, I don't want to be. There are no really good flights, but I can fly to Chicago anytime I want to. Outside of Penn State, which I will be willing to fly into Philly or wherever, and then drive to Happy Valley if I have to do that.
Oh no, that's an awful drive.
Yeah, you said it's awful drive. All
it's
of that.
It's so far.
Yeah, it's a bad drive. I drove from Baltimore to Philly. Excuse me, Baltimore, not to Philly. Gettysburg, Baltimore to Gettysburg. Worst drive I've ever had in my life. It was just so boring. It's like so people call it the South.
And by the way, Penn State's like another 2 or 3 hours from there. It's so far.
People who call the South Country have not been to the rural areas of the Midwest or even the Northeast. Like, that's country. True. And it's not even what you expect. But some of the cities are a lot easier.
Yeah, try to drive to Syracuse or Cornell. So far. Far.
Yeah.
But, actually, this is college town. So this is how much population is within a 50-mile radius.
Okay.
Now, one of the things is there's some schools that Florida State doesn't get this rap. Like, people understand that Florida State is a big market team. But like sometimes people talk about like Texas Tech or Washington State as being small market teams because there's like people don't live around them, but like they're not. You know, I mean, schools like Penn State, Washington State, like people watch them even though the school is in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, this is looking at like how many people are around the area of the school, and you see again, this is 50-mile radius from the city. You guys, it's 540,000. You know, Virginia is the only smaller one in the ACC. You'd be the smallest in the Big Ten. Believe it or not, I guess you're smaller than Penn State. I don't know. Maybe there's something. I guess there's something close by. I don't know.
So that 50-mile radius thing kind of stinks for us because like it really is bad. But like, Jacksonville is 2 hours. 2 hours to the city of Tallahassee. 2.5 hours from my house to Doak Campbell Stadium.
Okay.
And your major metro, well, ish metro. Pensacola, the same thing, going that way, another big number. I always tell people like, you know, I joke with recruiting. If I tell Florida State, and my friend had this, it's a really good theory. If Florida State will recruit within the 250-mile radius, make that most of their people, they'll be fine. They'll be able to win a lot of football games.
Yeah.
Don't go outside of that too often. Now Miami's further away, but I think what makes the TV viewing so great for Penn State is that a lot of people from Miami go to Florida State. A lot of people from Atlanta go to Florida State, Orlando, all these other people. So they watch because.
And this is where I try to break up the people's misperception about like, oh, it's a small. Look at the SEC. SEC TV numbers are through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
SEC schools do fine, even though they're like you said with trying to get to Ole Miss, like you can't even get there if you try. But again, you see like they look at the SEC numbers now, compare them to the Big 12 or the American, and tell me, do more people watch the SEC or do more people watch the Big 12 and the American?
That part, and then the other part of it is this too: is like when you look at Alabama is the state school of Alabama. You're going to get most of the Alabama market. Georgia is the state school of Georgia. You're going to get it's just outside of the 50-mile radius is Atlanta. You fly to Atlanta if you want to get a cheaper route to Athens. So like you have Atlanta. Florida does have the Orlando market, which is one of the bigger TV markets. So it's like when I was having this argument with somebody,
the UCF people told me it's all UCF, right?
Oh, they wish.
I'm just kidding.
They wish. They do have the benefit of having their own Central Florida television network. So, but that doesn't help you outside of that. And all ESPN has to do is if Florida State plays Florida, whether it's a big nighttime game or not, we're going to get the regional map of the Southeast for that. And that's what I was trying to explain to somebody why FSU. Well, they would want Miami because the Miami market was like. They're going to get the Miami market because it's on Fox. And if Florida State is playing an 8 o'clock game on Fox, they're going to give them every game. I mean, every Fox channel in the state of Florida. There is no sharing. So it's just some things like that.
Well, the other thing, which is what we went over before, like, you know, it's all the channel. Like, this is what I tell people. Like, look at what people always like, oh, our fans. Like, yeah, you have fans. Like, again, if you're watching us right now, you are a big football fan because if you're watching us right now, you're a big football fan. You don't count. Like you will watch your team on FS2 or ESPNU on a Thursday night. But the majority of actual viewers, right, are like the old lady next door who lost her remote and like she's just going to watch whatever's on CBS.
Old people.
It's Blue Bloods or football or NCIS, whatever.
It's what we used to say about on terrestrial radio. When we flipped that switch, we got 100,000 listeners no matter what. It doesn't matter if you like when we flip that switch, we know that's minimum is what's coming on because there are people who they'll come in and they will turn their radio, like 1010 Excel was the one, 8 a.m. when they get into work, and then it's in their car driving to work. It's on during the day. They may not even be listening to it. It's just on, and they'll hear bits and pieces just through noise static. And then that's just kind of how things go. Like my grandmother watches she watches you're either ABC soaps or you're CBS soaps. Doesn't matter which one, what soap they put on there. That's just channel brand and loyalty, which is ironic because I think the SEC is making a mistake from leaving CBS because all they did was indoctrinate an entire group of people to be used to watching CBS. They're taking the song and everything to use it for the Big Ten. So it's going to be interesting, man.
Yeah, it is. And Fox has really doubled down on it. So it's, it's an interesting thing. But I mean, whether you're in the SEC, and the other thing is too, the ACC, because the ACC is also very completely mixed in with ESPN and ESPN. I'm sorry, ESPN and ABC. The ACC is actually in a pretty good place TV wise. The only issue is that revenue gap. How do you close that revenue gap? And the issue that I worry about for Florida State is, is Florida State so focused on closing that revenue gap that they're going to do something dumb, like, oh, I'm going to like those people who took out a huge mortgage and be like, oh, I don't care that it's an adjustable rate because I really want to move to the neighborhood. Like, you got to be a little bit worried about the cost of getting there. And that's where I worry about things like people talk about private equity coming in. They talk about a lot of stuff. I'll tell you, in all honesty, what I would do if I was the state of Florida or the state of North Carolina, I would, and people can be mad at me for this, so don't hate me, guys. Again, go. I'm on your side. But if I was the state of Florida or the state of North Carolina, I would just give Florida State and North Carolina more money from the state and give it to them on the academic side and tell them take more tuition money and give it to sports to close the gap. Because I think that there are a lot of advantages of the ACC, and certainly for you guys, a lot of advantages of not having to pay to get out of the ACC. That the state would be better off just fixing it. Now, they're probably not going to, but it's not a bad idea.
Yeah. I feel like if school was taught this way, I don't think I would be a C student. I think I would have been better. I think it would have been better, man. You got any other cool stuff for us?
No, I think that's about it. Hold on, let me just see if there's anything at the end that we didn't quite hit. I think we hit a bunch more of them. This was interesting. This is basketball attendance. You can look at football attendance and basketball attendance. You see here, these are realigned. These are adjusting for realignments. You just sort of see the gap between the top 5 conferences and everybody else. And then this is looking at average football attendance, 2013 to 23, which is fiscal year 24. I got scolded at that in a tweet. But yeah, it's 2013 to 23 seasons. Where do you guys compare? Again, you had some bad years in this period, but you're still really good, right? You're in the upper 8th or so.
I mean, we had some years where we got beat by Clemson, and there's a viral picture of a professor reading a book at the time in an empty. Like, we had some very empty moments.
My own alma mater is right there with. Actually, my beloved alma mater is, I think, 2 down from you on that chart, so I understand.
Yeah,
we had some bad years too, but again, you get real strong. Like, Florida State football matters.
I like that. We may have to put all football doesn't matter. Florida State football matters.
I love Florida. Like I said, I love Florida State. Although I'm still mad. Did I tell you about why I'm still mad at Florida State for why I bombed a college statistics exam?
Yeah, good.
USC was going to Tallahassee. I think I was a sophomore, freshman or something. And I was in a statistics class, and it was the building was right next to the football practice field. And they were on their way to Tallahassee. So they brought the big speakers to blast the war chant at the football team during practice. And so the professor, we had a midterm review, and the professor would say, so the most important thing is to remember that, and like, it was like you'd watch the professor's mouth moving, but all the class could hear was the war chant being blasted from the football field next door. And I bombed the exam.
That's actually how I learned most of other teams' fight songs. Like, when
I believe it.
Doing noise control. in the stadium. Every Thursday practice, we would go in the stadium when we had away game or home game. We would go in the stadium, but away games, they would just pipe in sound, and they have to you would hear all of the different stuff. So that's probably not optimal when you kind of study for an exam, though.
I'll give you one other funny thing on that, by the way. Villanova was going to play at Penn State. And so they asked for permission to get speak, because Villanova is in a really ritzy suburb of Philadelphia. It's like what they call the main line. It's like the fancy, rich suburbs of Philadelphia. So Villanova asked for I guess they had to get a city waiver, a village waiver to play music, and the city said no. So they were like, "What do we do?" And they thought, "Well, what's the most uppity, rich suburb thing we could do?" So they went and got a bunch of those big gas leaf blowers, and all the football staff managers had to chase the players around all week at practice with gas leaf blowers going.
Wow.
And they said it was louder than the crowd, because you can't play music, but you are allowed to have really loud, leaf blowers in the ritzy suburbs of Philadelphia.
It's ironic the things that you could get away with.
Yeah.
And do what you can do and what you can't do. So good stuff, man. Listen, man, I appreciate you taking
the time
out. Again, people, so we're gonna chop this up. We got some good nuggets in here. Part of the reason why we must leave is because we're just not as well endowed as the other schools. So we gotta go find a place to help us grow. We can't even say we're a grower, not a shower. We need help.
You're growing. You're getting bigger.
We need help. Listen, 4 inches placed properly can pierce your heart. So just always remember that. But it is. I really appreciate it. I'm going to have her on the show, guys. Young lady Candace Cooper, North Carolina person. I'm also going to try to have my homegirl Vashti, because Candace is the one who hit me with it as more than sports. And I said, you know what? I was kind of like, yes, I wasn't feeling great. Now I got to know. I said, I know I got you now. I like arguing with people in general, but not arguing, excuse me. I like having intelligent discourse. And, but I also like learning things so that, and trying to break it down so that we can all be smarter. But you did bring up something that was a very, very, very good point about, you really have to love this to be watching me right now. There's so much better stuff that you can be doing right now than
we're glad to have you guys. We're glad to have you. Well, no, I always explain it to people, because they were like, it's like people that talk to me about, they say to me things like, oh, well, the reason that people watch late football games is because they have the triple double parlay bets. And I'm like, oh, hon, it's the people that watch late football games are like, my uncle who's up all night because of heartburn. It's not because of the people that have double, triple parlay bets on FanDuel.
Yeah, I don't think it's kind of like Twitter, right? It's a lot of people on Twitter, but it's such a small percentage of the world on Twitter. It's not real life. I'll give you
a great analogy.
So Colorado versus Colorado State. All that was talked about was how it was off the charts. Nobody would have ever watched this game. Nobody would have done this. What they failed to realize is that, I was at a party with him for the Gator Bowl. Florida played Tennessee. It was literally right after Florida, Tennessee, which, again, 8 p.m. game, really good. Went all the way up to it. Turned out to be a good game. I fell asleep on the thing. I wouldn't stand up watching this thing go back and forth like that, because Colorado State jumped on Colorado and nobody thought that was going to happen. So now people were watching because, oh my goodness, this is a better game than we thought it was going to be. Most late night games get watched either by that coast or there are a few degenerate gamblers, or there's guys, oh man,
just up all night.
I'm going to fall asleep on this game, but
yeah, it's
football on. So
that's exactly who it is. And that's who I'll tell you, though, that Colorado State game is wild, because it is so I have a TV database that I've built of every game televised since 2016. That is by 3 times the biggest game that's ever been watched late night. It's crazy.
Yeah, man. Wow. But All right, man. I appreciate you, brother. I will.
Thank you. Go
chop it up
Knowles.
with you later. And thanks for everything, man.
Anytime.
That's my guy Tony. Make sure y'all go follow him at TJ Outmore on Twitter. Really, really good follow. Very good with statistics. Very good with breaking things down to where you can really understand it and digest it. Like, he's a guy who I'm probably gonna have to keep having on more often as this landscape continues to go into a reverse Pangea. If you don't know what Pangea is, go look that up. It's about the continents and shit. If you're an adult, you should know what Pangea is. But not a placenta or a pancreas, but Pangea. Really, really good at that. I'm also going to try to get Danielle Kelly and my guy Rohan Law back on as we have some more developments that have happened with the ACC case and FSU amending their stuff right there. Again, right now, shout out to my guy Grant Gray, Marching Chiefs. Won VD on BG, so he gets $500. My guy Primetime Matt, he got the $92 that should be coming their way sometime tomorrow. On the road to trying to get to 6,000 subs. We're 870 away from that. Continue to look up our membership. And right now I'm looking for this chick right here, Nia. We are going to start that women in wrestling Discord. Shout out to Nia Jax. I hope she's not trending for anything bad. Can't have new boogie and get that's woo. 6 foot again. Like, I don't even understand when something's wrong. 6 foot 272 just did something to me when I saw that. Like, that's a lot of woman right there, boy. That's a hell of a board drill right there. Again, appreciate everybody for all the love. Make sure you guys continue to look at everything else. And appreciate you guys for chopping it up with me. And until then, we will see you guys next time.